Have you booked flights this summer? If you have, you will have seen that low fares are pretty much nowhere to be seen. So is cheap air travel a thing of the past? The interesting thing about this is Ryanair released their quarterly earnings this week, and guess what? They were the best ever. This week, I'm joined by Guillaume to delve into this in a little bit more detail. Guillaume, so Ryanair, Europe's biggest airline by passenger numbers, released results this week, and they seem to have been pretty good. What were the highlights?
Yes, Peter. Record profit for Ryanair for the first quarter of this year, 663 million euro profits, 4 times higher than last year, and a record, as you said. And it isn't just Ryanair. EasyJet as well has predicted record profit this summer because of high ticket prices, strong demand for travel, and still, some decent growth in passenger numbers expected towards the next year as well.
Okay, so those are pretty strong numbers. What's been driving this? What's the reason for this?
Well, it's very simple. It's just demand. Obviously, reopening since the pandemic. People have strong demand for short-haul flights. Actually, the 7th of July saw the busiest day ever for commercial aviation. There were 135,000 flights that were recorded globally. And a good way to measure that sort of occupancy is to look at load factors, which is effectively how many seats on the plane are filled. And Ryanair sort of came up with that figure. Historically, it's always used to be around 80%, and in Q1 that load factor for Ryanair was at 95%. Wow. So, really give you an idea of that strong demand for seats, and that's why it's hard to find those cheap fares. And then you pay for a seat, but then you also have to pay for check-in luggage. So it all adds up pretty quickly in terms of that flight cost.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin in a way. What about rising costs for Ryanair? How have they been impacted by that?
Yeah, that's true. Airlines haven't been immune from the rising costs that we've seen everywhere. Obviously, the main cost for airlines is staff. And they had to get staff back in the industry after downsizing during the pandemic. Yeah. So that was quite expensive to attract staff back in. Fuel is the second biggest cost for airline after labor. And there again, obviously jet fuel prices have gone up because of the demand and the recovery. So all those factors have had an impact. But still, compared to the increase in the average airfare, there's still a decent profit there, as we can see the numbers.
Okay, so another part of this is I was reading up about this subject. I also read that air travel is set to grow substantially over the next 25 years. So right now, about 4 billion people set to take flights in 2023. That's set to increase to 10 billion by 2050, according to the airline industry. And the reason I mentioned 2050 is airlines also have to target sort of net zero emissions by that stage too. So it's hard to see how these two things will work at the same time. What is your view on that?
Yes, no, I think it's a fair point, Peter. You can't really double air travel by 2050 and at the same time kind of meet your net zero commitments. It feels very challenging. Obviously, airlines are already taking measures to reduce carbon emissions. Again, using Ryanair as an example, they've ordered 300 new Boeing 737s over the next 10 years, and those are meant to be 15 to 20% more fuel efficient. So obviously you can sort of save a bit of carbon emission on this. They're also looking at alternatives to the standard aviation fuel. So there's lots of work going on in terms of sustainable aviation fuel that is being developed from waste oils, from non-food crops, for example. So that could also help to reduce those emissions, but it's still early days. There's also focus on hydrogen and electric, but those technologies have huge costs to develop. Massive infrastructure needed. So still really a hope at this stage. And when you look at those ambitions in terms of net zero, there will still need to be some serious technological breakthrough to really achieve that.
Okay, so in summary, when I think about this, increased demand between now and 2050, with additional costs possibly due to having to lower their emissions. So maybe my initial question, maybe the era of flights for $9.99 has actually passed. Guillaume, thanks again for covering this subject this week. Really interesting. And we'll be back again next week with a subject that's caught our eye. Thanks very much.